So we're now turning to 803.15 statements in documents that affect an interest in property. And we just saw in our previous section that the Compton oil case, it's Compton oil, let me check. Compton versus Davis oil case was the last one we just looked at. And there we saw that what kind of seemed like an extraneous statement, the identification of Nettie as David's wife in a transfer of land document was permissible, even though that itself was not essential to transferring the property. The relationship between David and Nettie was not integral to the document itself that transferred property. They could have been business partners. They wouldn't have had to have been married, but the relationship between the two of them that was described by that statement, David and his wife Nettie, hereby transfer, that was enough, or that was sufficiently related to what was going on with these parties, that it was admissible, even though not essential to the transfer of the land. In the People versus Burton case in Michigan, we really there's an attempt to stretch that doctrine much, much further, and it fails. So in this case, the victim is convicted. The defendant is convicted of second-degree murder of his wife, and the victim, his wife, leaves behind a will. It's not signed and it's not dated. And in it, she says, "Look, any property that I own, I want my parents to have it, not my husband. The reason for that is that I'm afraid of him and I think he's going to kill me." Now, the question then is, if in fact this is a document to transfer property, and it pretty clearly is, it's a type of will, we might exclude it because we think it lacks reliability, it's not signed, it might not actually, complete the task of completing a will. Though I think any kind of holographic will, just fancy word, meaning it's in the person's own handwriting. If it's in that person's handwriting, I think it's sufficient to transfer the property at death. But the question is, what about the statement in there that she's afraid of her husband? Does that come in? Now, we saw in the Shepherd versus U.S. case that the wife's belief that the husband had poisoned her wasn't really relevant to the case. Does the fact that she counts this as a basis for giving her property on her death to her parents rather than her husband, does that then sort of sanitize it? Does that then make it non-hearsay or an exception to hearsay because it's part of a document transferring property? And the court in Burton, the Michigan Supreme Court in Burton, says no, it doesn't. That this statement is so extraneous to anything that's necessary to transferring the property that this will not meet the exception under 803.15 for a statement within a document relating to property transference, because it's just not sufficiently connected to the act of the transfer. So there are limits. There are some statements that are somewhat tangential, like identifying the relationship between the parties. If Nettie had been identified as his business partner, that would have been probably close enough as well, much like she's identified as his wife in the Davis oil case. But in this case, where this is sort of a highly prejudicial statement that we'd seen in Shepherd was inadmissible, that sort of prologue to the property disposition doesn't exempt it from hearsay merely because it is contained within this document. There are limits to the Compton versus Davis oil proposition, and this has crossed that line. So as a general matter, any document that transfers property comes in, and as a general matter, those statements within it will come in, so long as they have some relevance to the nature of the parties and the transfer. These sort of longer historical claims, or these longer beliefs that would be highly prejudicial and not really related to the transfer, there's a limit. You can't just bring everything in because someone chose to include it in a document like this.